Hello everyone, this is Diane. I finished the Swan journals that I've been working on, so I'd like to show them to you. Two of these will go in my shop. This is one that will be in the shop, and this was made from a 1970s kids book, Summer of the Swans, and you can see the swan right here. So this, I decided when I got this book at a flea market that I would make a swan journal, and I've been collecting swan things for a while, probably a couple years, and I had enough to go ahead and make this journal. And I had a friend who wanted a journal with swans, so I figured it was a good time to do it. So it's one of those really thick, sturdy book covers. And I took the spine off and created a new spine with chipboard and Tyvek and fabric. And the paper pad that I used that has swans on it was pink and kind of a tealy blue, so I thought this fabric was perfect for it. I had to paint the chipboard with a cream color paint, just a cheap paint, because the fabric was thin enough that the chipboard color showed through and didn't look very pretty. So sometimes I have to, and it's very quick. Just swipe some paint on there and it dries quick, and I'm all set to go. And I added some of the pretty vintage blue rickrack. Look at the color of that book. Can you see? It looks textured. It's not just a solid color. There are stains on it because it's a vintage book. There's stains on the corners. The corners are pretty thick because it's a very thick cover. So I didn't try to put corners on it. And I just covered up the author's name with a very vintage, a real vintage Denison label with a blue border. Just put some pretty ombre cardstock on this and stamped "This book belongs to." Oh, I didn't show you the charm. There's a blue, what are these called? You know what they are. And I added 2 swan charms, a black one and a white, and then some blue and pink beads on this pretty dangle. There are 3 signatures, and there are 8 or 9 folded pages in each signature. I used Mrs. Cog's Majestic Swan images. Sorry about that. I'm gonna turn the sound off my phone. I used every single card from her kit. Used them all up for the 3 journals. 2 of the journals are only 1 signature. And I used this paper pad, which I forgot the name of it, but it's got swans on it. Not all of it. It had 2 sheets, 2 different sheets with swans on it, but I used others of the papers because of the pretty colors. I put some lace trim on the front. I made this swan with my Cricut and put it on as a tuck spot, not a glue spot. And this was also made with my Cricut, and these were both made with the Picturesque cartridge. And here is a Mrs. Cog's image with some sari silk stapled on with a copper staple. Isn't that cute? And I stamped Dream on the back of it. Oh, I didn't realize I stamped Dream at the top of the page too. That's okay, we can dream twice. This is a gorgeous vintage card. I love that card. I had 2 vintage cards, and I put them both in this journal. It opens like this, so you could put some glue here and seal it up and tuck something in there make it a pocket. That's just a word from Mrs. Cog's stamp up there. This is some pretty wrapping paper. And some music paper with a little banner embellishment that I made. Has a piece of lavender vellum back there and some embossed cardstock and a stamp, a swan stamp, and some seam binding. And I had this swan fabric piece, and it also has some really pretty flowers. So the this paper had flowered papers too, and this fabric had beautiful flower bunches, and the colors from both matched beautifully. So I just added this pretty lace, a little bit of ribbon at the top. It's cute fabric. And this is one of the pages that came with that swan paper. It's got a rose gold metallic embellishment on it, which is really pretty. There's a stamp down here on this dyed paper. And this came from a German book. It's got a swan on it, obviously, but it's all written in German. Someone sent that to me in a Happy Mail. Just a little embellished lace tag up there. And this was the back of the German page, and it featured a bird other than a swan, so I covered it up with some pink dyed paper and put on this little swan from my Cricut, and that's from Mrs. Cogs. I made this tag. I didn't end up putting it in a pocket, so I just sewed it to the top. So it's kind of like a fabric flip. And you can put a picture or write or whatever you want to do down there. So it's double-sided muslin, 2 layers of muslin, and a Mrs. Cogs image, and some embellishments, some sari silk. Here's a little corner piece that I made with my Cricut, and I put that on as a tuck spot, and then added this illustration from a children's book, backed with dyed paper. I made some little word or phrase clusters at the tops of some of the pages. This one says, "Be brave and fly." It's got some embossed cardstock, some fluffy fiber, the word, and a little daisy trim, vintage. And here we have a piece of vellum, pale green vellum with some lace, and an image cut from a book about birds. And then this was from a book, feels like a card because I backed it with cardstock. And let me tell you, this was a ledger, piece of ledger paper, cardstock ledger. And that's what I wanted to show there. I have it right here. This is what it looked like. But I put the glue on this side and glued it down, and I didn't even notice it until I was doing one of my final flip throughs. It's like, oh, that's not what it's supposed to be on the back. So I just put a journaling card on there. And this was a stamp that is a label. I had stamped it and cut it out, and it was in my stash, so I saw it on my table and I thought I should just fold that in half and make it into a tab. It's a cute tab. I will do that again with that. Got to stamp some more of those and get them in my stash again. Here's another corner from the Cricut and another Mrs. Cogs image. And the other side of that beautiful greeting card. It says happiness up there. And the second signature, we have the rose gold decoration on this paper and a vintage trim. A pocket made with a cutoff. This was one of the quotes that I have in my word snippet book. It came out of a magazine, and the color of the text went very well with this, so I just put it on there. It says, "This is what I want to do." So you can write about your plans or whatever, tuck something in here. And there's another Cricut tag. And here is another gorgeous greeting card, vintage card. It did not have a swan, but I thought it was beautiful. Can you imagine the swans going under that little bridge? And it's a cutout here. I just love that. I only had 2 cards that had swans, and I needed 3. There's another piece of wrapping paper with swans, and another banner embellishment with a postage stamp. Here's from the fabric that had the swan on it. Isn't that pretty? It's pretty lace, and then this fabric underneath, and rose gold again, and pink paper. That says create. Oh. This was a calendar page, and it was all written on the back. This was the pretty picture with the swan, but on the back side it was the actual calendar, and it was just full of writing. And so I just covered up the top of it with that rose gold striped paper, and then glued the edges together to make it form a little pocket. I just finished doing that, so the glue must have seeped out a little. Oh, looks like I have to put a little more glue down here, but you can put whatever you want to in there. Just hold, keepsake in there. There's a lace tab up there, so that's the center of the signature. There's another fabric flip. It says memories, and another word cluster. It says stay wild, because swans are wild birds. There is a dotted vellum. I don't know if you can see the dots. Probably can't. Oh, there they are. And this vintage postcard with a swan family, written in French. This is an image from Dreams, Etc. ephemera set. It is an easy cut ephemera. So, and the colors are exactly the right colors I need for this journal. This is from a book, and I just glued it to some coffee dyed paper and stamped Dare to Dream. Here's the other side of that greeting card, and it's dated 1947. There was, it was stuck in a scrapbook, and some of the paper was from the scrapbook was still on there where the glue was, so I just put some ledger paper that you can write on. This is a blue dyed paper. And then the final signature, this pretty pocket here with a stamp on it, and another swan tag, this pretty trim. And here's another stamp, a rubber stamp, and a postage stamp. And here's the other swan card. Isn't that pretty? This one's embossed. I stamped that up there and it didn't come out good, so I stamped it again on the scrap of pink paper and tore it out. It says established 1873. And here's the final banner cluster embellishment. It says fly high. A swan fabric piece. Look at that pretty rose gold paper. And this is from one of the vintage magazines that I recently got for the Swan garden hose. The colors are beautiful, and it's very vintage looking. It's from the 1940s or 50s, one or the other. And this came from a book about, and this is a story of the ugly duckling, which was really a swan. At the bottom it says, in the Swan, Camille Saint-Saëns showed us in music this beautiful white bird gliding calmly over smooth waters broken only by little ripples. Majestically lifting its head, the swan circles about before us, then swims off out of sight. It's a beautiful piece of music if you're not familiar with it. It's called The Swan by Camille Saint-Saëns, a French composer. But this is the story of the ugly duckling, and then this was just a little instructional, educational tidbit down there. That was pretty cool. There's a little bit of green dyed paper on the back of this. This was a magazine cover that I purchased a couple years ago from a flea market. Some little labels table up there. Here is another corner piece with a tag. Guess it's glued together. I think maybe this was a name card, and I think it had a stick or something stuck in there that you could make it stand. Anyway, I'm not even sure where I got it. I thought it was pretty, so I put it in there. Here's another fabric flip. And a word snippet collage wonder. And here is a piece of acetate with a doily pattern on it, some rosettes. And this is a photograph I took at an amusement park. They had swans in their pond. And I glued it to a piece of colored index card and added a tab that I punched out of embossed cardstock. Here's another piece of acetate that I backed this illustration from a children's book. I love that. And I just cut a piece of pink cardstock. I didn't want to detract from that pretty illustration, so it's just a plain piece of cardstock and a little tag that I stamped on. And there's another swan stamp. This one is a paper clip, and it holds these ladies and the swans. There's some antique lace and embossed paper and velvet ribbon right here. And there we go. Got my signature there. So this one is called Summer of the Swans. What did I take this out of? Here. So this is another photograph that I took at that amusement park. And that goes in there. I don't know why I took it out and didn't put it back. The other journal that will be in the shop is the pink one. This is a one signature journal, and this one is called In My Heart. It's made with the same paper collection, and I just used the pink dotted one for the cover. And it's got a Mrs. Coggs image on the front with collaged vintage music paper, mulberry paper, tissue paper, and some bits of lace and a little button. The back is plain. I slipped pink seam binding through the stitching, and I put some lace on the edge. There's that swan tuck spot, and I added this bookmark that came from Current. You can pop that out and then slip it over your book page, but it's still unbroken, and it says Current incorporated on it, but it's a beautiful swan. And then here's what Mrs. Coggs' image. It says Dream. Pink paper. It says Wondrous up there. And this is from the book, from this book. Some swans swimming on the pond. Here's a pretty pocket, and I added a little scrap of the paper collection to the top so that this wouldn't just blend right into the back there. I wanted it to stand out. And here is a postage stamp, and then one of my Cricut tags. This is from a book, an Audubon book of birds, and it's a swan. You'll see the head of the swan on the other side. And again, I covered the back side with dyed paper. Ledger paper here. There's a pretty stamp there. This has a sheer pocket with yellow embroidery on it. And this is a card. It's not vintage, but it's really pretty. This is a printer paper, one of those printer stationery papers. And there's a fabric flip. I love this embroidered ribbon up there, or lace. Here's the wrapping paper. This is a page from that paper collection with the swans, and a lace tab up there. Here's a book from a beautiful book. I think the book was about flowers or gardens or something, and it had quotes and beautiful, beautiful images of paintings. And there were two that had swans on them, so each of these small journals got one. And I put it in the center of the book and sewed it down on the top and the bottom so that it became a tuck spot, a pocket. And I put Mrs. Cog's images in each pocket with a lace tab and a word. And at the ends of the strings, when I sewed the book together, I left the strings long and tied on a beautiful swan charm and this pink bead piece. Here's a paper clip with the swan stamp, and it's holding this card on. So you slip it on with the paper clip on this side. I did not want the paper clip competing with the swan image, so they are on opposite sides of the page. Just have to put it on carefully so it doesn't get caught in the lace and go underneath the paper. Here's the fabric tag in this book, and I did put it in a pocket here. And this is a beautifully embossed vellum that's kind of a pearlescent finish. It's got some lace at the top and another Dreams Etc. image. It's the same image that I used as a tuck spot in the big book, but it's just smaller. And here's the swan from the Audubon book. A corner piece and this pretty image. And this says enchanting. And I'll just quickly go through the other book that my friend commissioned me to make, because there are some different images and things in there. It says use your wings. And here's the pretty collage with the beautiful pink and blue images and the swans, and there's a vintage button there and some tatting. This is vintage lace along the edge. I love this stamp. This is a page from that German book. Again, a page from the Audubon book. That sheer lace with the yellow embroidery, and this is a card. Blank inside so it can be written on. This is from the My Book House series of books, and there's a swan. This is, I think it's about a story of some brothers that were turned into swans. Or maybe the girls were turned into swans. I don't remember. There's a fabric flip. And here is another of the images from that beautiful book. This is one of the Mrs. Cog's images too. It was a journal card in the other book I just showed. And there's a swan on this tag, or not tag, on this string, the black swan, and then a beautiful blue, deep blue bead. And paper clip. I'll put that on off camera. And here is the tag, fabric tag, with a vellum pocket. Here's a picture of the swan. So it's the guys that got turned into swans. I think there were 7 brothers, and then there were 7 sisters that came to see them. I do not recall how the story goes. And that one says Grace. So I'm going to be photographing these and getting these in my shop, and so when you see this video, these 2 journals will be in my shop unless they've already sold. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you really enjoyed seeing the creation of these swan journals and the finished product. I had fun making them. They're just so beautiful and elegant creatures, and the images are beautiful, and all the papers that I got to use were beautiful, so I hope I did them all justice, and I'm very pleased with how they turned out. Thanks for watching, and have a creative day. Bye-bye.